I gotta say, I like your Simpsons and Futurama merchandise that you got in the
Yes.
background. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slightly complicated background, a bit like your
Oh
uh,
yes, yes. So my one's very complicated. I got a kind of poster of Einstein there and a mask of Donald Trump on the other side. So yes, very sort of polarizing. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I got actually a copy of your Simpsons and their Mathematical Secrets. So I did read it quite a long time ago, but I found it very interesting with some of the mathematical themes it discussed, and it was kind of one of those first books that really introduced me into the more sort of interesting world of mathematics. And I just kind of wondered, kind of what was your inspiration behind sort of making that book, and kind of what was your research process when kind of putting together these bits and pieces to write it.
So I think the hardest thing about writing is finding something to write about.
Yeah,
If you find a really good subject, then writing is easy.
yeah,
Um, it's the hardest thing about writing is when you picked a boring topic or yeah. So the fact that there's maths in The Simpsons was just an extraordinary discovery.
yeah.
I think other people have noticed it, obviously before I had, but when I noticed it, I thought, well, that's a book that just is begging to be written. And so I was lucky that the writers were really keen to talk to me. So I spent some time emailing them, talking to them. I went to Los Angeles and spent a week with them, and they were just, they love maths, obviously, and so they were very keen to talk to me and um, try and help me write a really good book in terms of conveying who they are and what they're doing and why they do it. Um, and and then, as I said, other people had discovered it before me, so I was able to talk to people who'd done research into this before and so on. And then, I know you said you'd read Fermat's Last Theorem, which is 6 big chapters,
Yeah.
and or maybe 7 or 8 big chapters. So I did the same thing for the Simpsons book. I had 5 or 6 or 7 big chapters.
Yeah.
Um, one was all about Lisa, one was all about Pi, one was all about, Futurama and so on. But when I was flying over to see the writers, I just rewrote the whole book because, again, structure is really important. If you can get the structure right, then again, writing the book becomes very easy because everything flows very, very naturally. And I rewrote the book into about, I think, 17 or 18 chapters because The Simpsons is short and punchy and lighter and pacey. And so having these big, heavy chapters was not the way to do it. So I rewrote the book as 18 little chapters, which is great because it means that as the chapter progresses, things get a bit more complicated. But if they get too complicated, then bang, you're into a new chapter.
Yeah.
So the reader doesn't feel as though they're going to get confused as they might if it was a big long chapter developing a long, more complicated argument. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's just very, very interesting. And also, I know that you did a documentary for Fermat's Last Theorem, and I believe you won a BAFTA for it, which I found was very fascinating. As
Yeah,
kind of, I never expected sort of like a filmmaking side to come out. So I wondered, do you use like a similar approach to filmmaking, or how did those sort of ideas
yeah.
come through
So
from there?
the documentary is still available on BBC iPlayer.
Yeah.
So you can always watch it online or download or stream it. It's still there. So I used to work on a TV show called Tomorrow's World,
Right. Yeah.
which was short 5-minute films. And then from there, I went on to Horizon, which was obviously bigger 50-minute films. And so that's where I learned to write. That's where I learned to, again, these things about finding a good story and structuring the story and, keeping things interesting and having a narrative and drama and cliffhangers. That all of that I learned when I was in television because it's much harder to write for television than it is to write a book.
Yeah.
When you write a book, the reader has paid £10 to read this book, they've actively made a decision, so they have a very high level of commitment.
Yeah.
Somebody watching TV has a very low level of commitment. They can just change channel in a flick of a finger. So you have to work much harder to hook people in. So all of those things that I learned in television, I took into my writing when I moved to books. So I think my books are more like television writing than most science writers.